Amateur Radio News and Notes for Friday, May 22nd, 2026. I'm Ed Kabik, November 2, Echo Charlie. In the log this week, we've got a Dayton Hamvention 2026 recap with a whole bunch of interviews for you to enjoy. Also, talk about some MVARC Nets on the air. We'll see what's happening with DX. Get a solar activity update, talk about some upcoming contests, and take a look at interesting online radio content. As always, links to all of the reference content can be found in the show notes or at our Substack at mvarc.substack.com. The 2026 edition of Dayton Hamvention took place on May 15th through 17th, 2026, and Amateur Radio News and Notes was there. There were new product announcements from Icom and Yaesu, scores of vendors and flea market attendees selling their wares, many forums to attend, and several awards given to individuals and organizations of note in the amateur radio hobby. Perhaps the most anticipated announcements of Hamvention were those from Icom. They had several new and upcoming items on their list, including the ID 5200 mobile VHF UHF rig, which was on display with support for APRS and a Bluetooth KISS TNC. A price and release date has not yet been announced, but it is likely to be released at Tokyo Ham Fair later this year. Also announced was a new microphone and the AH6 automatic antenna tuner, but both have no announced release date. The big tease from Icom was their X-026 prototype. They had a plastic mock-up under glass, but it was just a black box with no details on it. And the Icom staff were more interested in getting attendees' thoughts on what it could be than on giving any real specifics. Amateur Radio News and Notes was able to get some time with Icom's Ray Novak and 9JA to talk about what they brought to Dayton.
Hey, I'm here with Ray Novak here at the Icom booth, N9JA, and of course everybody knows Ray. Ray, you've got a lot of things being announced here, some a little more real than others, some still in the prototype phase. Tell me about what we're looking at here, new stuff here from Icom.
Well, a couple of the things here. We're in various stages of prototypeness here. We've got the new X-026, which is in a design concept. You know, one of those molded vehicles at the auto show that everybody goes, oh, that is so cool. And then in the automobile industry, maybe 20 years later, they finally released the Tonka version of the Bronco. That took forever, but then we've got a microphone that is designed by the JAIA. I've heard that it looks like one of the Heil microphones, the PR781. Had somebody else tell me it looks like a Rode microphone. I haven't had a chance to play with it to see what the front to back looks like, but it's got in it the buttons to trigger. Like I said, I haven't had a chance, but it looks like it triggers the digital voice keyer in the radio. We've got two almost production prototypes here, one being the AH6, which is 160 through 6 meters, both a random wire or a coax-fed antenna system. And then finally, the ID 5200.
Well, very good. Well, I'm very excited. I know there's a lot of buzz around the X-026. I know you and I were talking a little earlier. It might be a little while before it goes to market, but a lot of speculation. Do you have any favorite guesses you've been hearing, or because I know a lot of people have been asking about it.
The more favorite guesses, I guess I could say, isn't the ones where they're like speculating at what bands it will do. It's more, what would you like to see outside the box? And those have been the ideas that I've liked the most, because it gives me an idea of hams thinking differently. Instead of just where does the microphone plug into, how long's the remote head cable, I want to see it do this band, that band, the other. I want the typical things that you would expect out of a black box. But I'm having fun hearing some of the things like what we did in the ID 5200 with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, APRS, things like that. So those are the fun outside. It's definitely outside the Icom box with like the APRS.
Fantastic. Well, Ray, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, got a lot of people want to talk to you, but I appreciate you spending some time with us, and look forward to seeing all this stuff out in the market.
All right, thank you very much.
Another highly anticipated set of announcements was from Yaesu. They announced the latest version of their digital voice system, Yaesu System Fusion 3, along with their new DR3X repeater systems. No price or release dates were announced, but Amateur Radio News and Notes spoke to Corey Sickles, WA3UVV, to learn more about what Yaesu announced at Dayton.
Looking at the release here, I know that we're talking about System Fusion 3 and then the new series of the DR3 repeaters. Can you tell me a little about that? What's new in 3, and what can people look forward to with the new repeaters? I know a little bit more power, right?
It is more power. The new repeaters are now available. They have dual band, dual input receivers still, compared to the DR2X, but a single transmit output and a single band. And the reason for that is that the increased power, what's available with today's technology for a given price point is such that it's easier to do in a monoband configuration. So with VHF you get 85 watts out. With the UHF you get 65 watts out. 100% duty cycle, full bore. That's kind of the story of that part of things.
Well, very good. So my the club that I run this podcast through, we use the 2. Mm-hmm. What would be so obviously more power. I noticed also some new signal processing on that.
There's a interference avoidance system. More information will be coming out about that. I don't want to speak about it just yet. But if you have, and this is used in some commercial applications elsewhere in the world, you have interference, the repeater can switch to a different input frequency automatically and communicate that transfer to radios with firmware that will be upgraded at some point to do the same thing. So we would be an additional memory you'd have for this situational kind of thing when it goes to that.
So would this be something where you'd have members of the club would sort of program it ahead of time with some sort of a key, and then it would know, okay, it's time to go based on that authentication?
Right. One example I could give of this, and it's not the perfect one, but for my own club, we have a repeater up in the mountains. There's a SCADA unit not too far from us. Every day at the exact same time, a gas valve opens, and it puts that noise into the repeater. We once had that thing hang, and it just tied up the repeater. Couldn't do anything about it other than report it to the gas company. Because we knew who the perpetrator was based on past experience. So this is something that, in that scenario, the DR3 configured accordingly, and the users, it would flip to that.
Okay, so I imagine in tight urban areas where you have you don't have a lot of open frequencies, that might be a bit of a challenge. Or is so I know that they only transmit on the band that they're for, but they do listen on both, right? So would this be a situation where would people be moving from, say, VHF to UHF for the input during that time, or would it?
That is one possibility. Let's say it's a UHF repeater. We have 30 megahertz on the 70 centimeter band. We heavily use 10 of that. Give the satellites their due. There's still a lot of open room down in the 430 range for auxiliary inputs, if you will, for something like that. So they're really, when we get to that band, we really don't have the crowding of things.
Well, very good. And another thing I noticed to talk about was the ASP, which I know some of your newer rigs have. So with this, so is my understanding right that essentially in weak signal conditions, it's going to add a level of audio processing, and then that would then be boosting or taking that processed audio on the repeater output.
Right. So very current, state-of-the-art digital signal processing for an analog signal. If you've had things like picket fencing, fried eggs, the different sounds we have, it remedies that to whatever extent it needs to, that the technology allows. It's a really great thing. I mean, somebody who has used FM since the 70s, and there are just certain things you just live with. we're now at a point where we have a delivery of something where you don't have to live with that.
Fantastic. And then in terms of the System Fusion 3 part, so what other things can people expect from the new standard? I know it's backward compatible, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're not taking anything away. There will be new features via firmware for certain radios, new things, to come. If you remember the old Tonight Show billboard, more to come along with that. And some of this is being developed. What you have right here is a working pre-production unit. It's a real product. The firmware, software, things like that, later to be released to allow some of these features.
Any timelines on when people can expect?
Nothing that I do not know. So if I were to give you a date, it would be a lie, and we don't do that. But just stay tuned, pay attention to those things coming up. A lot of exciting stuff with this.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time.
If you look at the front panel, you might notice a few things over the DR2 also. USB-C input, SD-RAM. So take with what you might want to with that.
Absolutely.
The way of programming features, that sort of thing.
And is there any pricing right now, or is that still?
None whatsoever.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for your time.
Too will be coming.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, Ed.
Another vendor showing off some of their newer releases was Flex Radio. They were highlighting their Aurora line of transmitters announced last year at Dayton. We spoke with Michael Walker, VA3MW, to find out more about what they had on offer.
I'm here with Michael Walker of VA3MW at Flex Radio. And Michael, what's Flex got on offer these days? What should we know about from the Flex booth?
Well, it's the second Dayton Hamvention that the Aurora radio has been out, and that's been our big interest. And you know what, our biggest seller? So that's a 500 watt, not QRP, transceiver, HF, from 160 through to 6 meters, 200 watts on 6 meters. But it runs its new technology called polar modulation, or envelope elimination and restoration, which makes it incredibly power efficient. Now, most of us don't care, but 500 watts and you're only drawing 6 amps from a typical house circuit means that you also do not have to special wire power into your shack. And because it's a Flex radio, it also has latest, greatest features that we build or whatever. And did you know I have a cool line that Flex radios get better as they get older? And even if you bought one of our 6000 series, I don't know, back in 2012, it's still better than the day you took it home.
Yeah, absolutely. They're amazing. I've been looking at the Aurora. It looks like an amazing radio. I know you have there are two different main models. Of course, there's also the Maestro and the non-Maestro. I think the difference there is whether or not it has a display or is fully network connected. But what's the difference between the two different models that you have of those, for the lesser expense and the higher expense?
Right. So the radios come with one or two. Well, every radio comes with something called a spectral capture unit. Every radio you buy today. And that's the part where we take the energy from the antenna and convert it into whatever we're going to do with it. And in today's direct sampling world, where we convert that into numbers, that direct sampling is incredibly critical. Flex Radio direct samples the entire HF spectrum from 30 kilohertz to 54 megahertz, meaning that we can use multiple receivers at the same time anywhere in the HF spectrum, not just 100 kilohertz away. So you could be on 160 and 6 meters at the same time. So that's incredibly powerful for a variety of reasons. So that's if it comes with one spectral capture unit and it comes with an AB antenna switch. So the 520 series or the 8600 series come with two spectral capture units, and it's like having two radios on your desk at the same time. So if you were a 6 meter op in days before, we might have our TS or 520 or something on the desk for HF, but then another radio dedicated to 6 meters only, because if you're a 6 meter hunter, you never know when it's going to show up. So that's the core differences. And then you share the transmitter. So it's not like it's a sub receiver. They're all main receivers. And some radios come with 2 VFOs or 4. We call them slices because they're a slice of the radio spectrum.
And when you have multiples of those, does your own transmit interfere with your receive, or are they isolated in some way?
They can, based on math. They're incredibly well isolated from each other, but of course, if I'm transmitting on 7150 and I'm on 20 meters at 14,300, which is the second harmonic, I'm certainly going to see it. But it's not anything to really worry about. It doesn't damage anything.
And I imagine probably some people are using it for stuff like SO2R kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, the 8600 and the Aurora 520 series, if you're a contester, single operator 2 radio, includes many things. So if you want to build one today in another world, you're buying 2 radios, 2 amplifiers, audio switching circuitry. This is all actually built in the radio, so you can put down a single radio like an Aurora 520 on a desk with being able to use different antennas and have QRO power, 520 watts, and full N1mm or similar SO2R integration. And that includes the audio switching called OTRSP. Yeah, I forgot what it stands for. But when you need to have one VFO on one ear and the other on the other, and then quickly switch so they're mono, and you get and it's all built in.
I saw a wild video, I think it was about a week ago on YouTube, where a guy took an Aurora out to a park to do POTA, and he was using one of these battery-powered power banks, but was absolutely able to incinerate the ionosphere and get all the contacts. So
that was David. He's in the UK, and he took a 520M, I believe, and very fun guy. I did a show with one of his shows, and he took I think it was a Blue Yeti, a 1,000-watt Blue Yeti. Now, I had done the math on this, and I said, hey, if I wanted to take this POTA-esque, and how long could I run a 1,000-watt device for if I was going to do a mixture of sideband, CW, and FT8? And I dumped that into an AI and gave it a bunch of parameters, and it said, well, about 7 hours. And that's what he came up with an answer, right? He operated at 200 watts into was a DX Commander Expedition.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, for about 6 or 7 hours. And dead, no generator running or anything. He said it was awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, this sounds really exciting. I know what I want for Christmas, but thank you so much for taking the time. And I know you're busy, but Michael, Best 73, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed. Pleasure to meet you.
Just across the way from Flex Radio was the American Radio Relay League booth, and we stopped by to chat with ARRL CEO David Minster, NA2AA, about what's happening this year with the league.
I'm here with the CEO of the Amateur Radio Relay League, David Minster, NA2AA, and wanted to ask you, David, what's going on lately with the ARRL? Is there anything that listeners should know about, things they can do, and fun stuff happening coming up soon?
Sure. So ARRL this year, it's the year of the club. And so there's a lot of attention on getting clubs more active, growing clubs by having special interest groups in a lot of different areas. To that end, we have the Marconi program, which we encourage clubs to get involved in. And one of the things that we're doing in conjunction with Year of the Club is the U.S. Semi-Quincentennial. And we've got W1AW portable stations on the air through the course of the year. And it's one of the endorsements that you can get for the America 250 Worked All States Award. So there's a lot of good reasons to get on the air this year that ARRL is hoping people will take advantage of. And the other thing is we have 2 new books that are out, and one that you and I talked about is the fact that Salty Walt's got his second book out, which is an absolutely great book for people that like to experiment with antennas and getting out into the field. These are very simple to deploy antennas that have more gain than just a vertical, so you can play with some performance antennas that are really low price. We've also brought out a new satellite book, and it was written by a guy who has worked with our collegiate program since he was in college, and the book is really written for people that want to get on the air, work the birds, and getting on the air with satellites happens to be one of the areas in the Marconi program that I mentioned before. So lots of good reasons for folks to get on the air.
Well, fantastic. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. I really appreciate, I know you're busy, you got a long line of people here, but thank you so much for your time, and thanks for all that you do with the Amateur Radio Relay League.
Terrific, thanks.
And speaking of Salty Walt, we got to talk with Walt Hudson, K4OGO, about his new book, which he was signing at the ARRL booth.
All right, I'm here at the ARL booth with Salty Walt K4OGO. Of course, as you know from the podcast, we listen and watch his channel quite a bit. Walt, you got something new today. Can you tell us about what's going on in your new book?
Hi, Ed. Yeah, second book. My first book was Salty Walt's Portable Antenna Sketchbook. This is Salty Walt's Next Level Portable Antenna Sketchbook. And it's kind of a continuation from the first book, but just a little bit more challenging, a little bit more portable, mostly portable wire antennas that anyone can build, but it takes antenna building to the next level. Pun not intended, but yeah, you know what I'm saying there.
Well, fantastic. Well, I know I've been a long time watcher of your channel. You have a lot of inspiring designs, and I love how from very simple kinds of things, wire, anybody can make an antenna, and then you show not only can you make the antenna, but you can work the world with it. So thanks for all you do, Walt.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
In addition to the announcements, Hamvention awarded Robert Finiglio K3RF the Technical Achievement Award, Dr. Jose Otis Vicens NP4G, the Amateur of the Year Award, Martha Fell, N3QBE, and Joe Fell, W3GMS, the Special Achievement Award, and the Long Island CW Club was awarded Club of the Year. More on the achievements of these deserving recipients can be found at a link in the show notes. This year's Hamvention was a lot of fun. Thanks to all the volunteers of the Dayton Amateur Radio Association who put on such a well-organized event every year. And thanks to everyone who stopped to say hello and introduce themselves to me. I'm definitely looking forward to next year. Now let's talk about some MVARC Nets on the air. We have our 2-meter FM net on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on the repeater. That is immediately followed by the 2-meter digital net on Yaesu System Fusion C4 FM on the same frequency. On the weekends, we've got the MVARC Slow Speed CW Roundtable on Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 a.m. on 3.565 megahertz CW, which is immediately followed by the MVARC Cherry Tree Net on Saturdays and Sundays at 8:30 a.m. on 3.920 megahertz lower sideband, where we always have a great conversation, and you're always welcome to join us. And now let's take a look at what will be happening with DX. There'll be a lot of DX on the air this week. Stations on the air include Galapagos, Western Sahara, Kenya, French Polynesia, Mauritius, Juan Fernandez Island, Namibia, Palau, Tonga, St. Kitts and Nevis, Ascension Island, Cyprus SBA, Chatham Island, Martinique, Bolivia, Bonaire, Azerbaijan, and Maldives. A calendar of DX expeditions can be found at NG3K's announced DX operations list at ng3k.com. And now it's time for a solar activity update. As we go to press, the solar flux index, or SFI, was 118, and the estimated sunspot number was 67, with 5 numbered sunspot regions visible from Earth. Over the last week, the SFI has increased. Solar activity has been at low levels in the last 24 hours. The geomagnetic field has been at quiet to unsettled levels in the last 24 hours, and the KP index reached 3 yesterday. The solar wind peaked at 490 kilometers per second. Solar activity is predicted to be at low levels with a chance for M-class flares today through Sunday. The geomagnetic field is forecast to be at quiet to unsettled levels today and Saturday, and at quiet levels on Sunday. The chance of solar radiation storms at the S1 or greater level is at 5% today through Sunday. R1 to R2 radio blackouts are possible with a predicted probability of 25% today through Sunday. R3 or greater blackouts are unlikely with a 5% chance predicted today through Sunday. It remains a fantastic time for amateurs to get on the air and work the world. Good sources of real-time solar information include spaceweatherlive.com and solarham.com. A good overview of conditions can be found at dx.qsl.net/propagation. To see D-layer absorption data and associated radio blackouts, visit the NOAA DRAP page. And to see real-time maximum usable frequency, MUF, and critical frequency, or FOF2 information from RadioSonde data, visit prop.kc2g.com. And now let's take a look at some upcoming contests. This weekend is the calm before next weekend's CQ Worldwide WPX CW Storm. So there are only a few contests on the air this weekend. This weekend brings the real-time contest and the QRP ARCI Hoot Owl Sprint. As always, the K1USN SSTs, MSTs, and CWTs will also be on the air. The full contest calendar with events and exchanges can be found at contestcalendar.com. And now let's wrap things up with some interesting online radio content. As always, all the links for everything we are about to mention are in the show notes and also at our Substack at mvarc.substack.com. Dugbo, KD7RT, shows us why he does soda as he goes to where summits have no name on his mountain bike. Walt K4OGO reveals which QRP radio he has selected to take to an upcoming trip to Australia. Forrest KI7QCF tries out the new Palm Radio Mini Mic on his first ever SSB activation. Kevin KB9RLW shows how he modeled a snag-free pulley using 3D printing. Mark KD7DTS activates SOTA with Becky W6BKY and Devin W6DVN. Josh KI6NAZ shows us the reveal of the new Icom 5200 and X-026 radios. Stuart VE9CF discusses the DX Marathon, and Josh KI6NAZ does a walkthrough of the 4 Days in May vendor night. Well, that is it for this week. I've been Ed, November 2 Echo Charlie. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We hope you have a great week ahead. Best 73, and we look forward to seeing you next week.